Have you ever just stood around and done a thing and, I don't know, give a little yappy grandma dog a bath, and the dog happens to also have fleas? And since you work with animals for a living, you know how to wash a dog and get rid of them, but you still need to go pick them off of said dog. And as you do, you go, I can make a film about this. Hi, I'm Daryl, and a couple months ago I had released my capstone film, We Ignored the Signs, a sci-fi horror film of a scientist's last log about a research colony him and his team had started, and all of the reasons it failed. And this is JJ. JJ is my dog my family took in when my grandma passed, but she is also the reason this film exists. Back in the summer of 2023, the day our fight started for that year, funny enough, I was at my grandparents' old house. My grandparents used to live next to the woods in the middle of nowhere, but while I was visiting, I hung out with the two dogs that they had at the time. Squirrel, who is terrified of everything, and JJ, who loves everyone. JJ is also a chronic flea magnet, which is a horrible mix, as she has both long fur and they lived next to the woods. So when I visit, I would try to clean her up as best as I could for my grandma, and while watching her, I thought about how the fleas probably felt when you pick them off of animals. And that was the thought that birthed We Ignore the Signs from my head. And so that is what I want to make this video about, the thought process behind We Ignore the Signs, and what I couldn't share or explain in the film itself, all because the development for this film was just so much fun to do. I've been wanting to talk about my thought process when making this like a director's cut, and since I make YouTube videos talking about art and stories, I have a place I can easily share that thought process with. We're going to do a little different thing though. Because of the nature of this, I won't be having one art piece playing in the background for this video, but I do have multiple time lapses saved from the concept art and color keys I did. I also have other behind the scene clips and shots that will be played, so there will be a feast of art and mediums for you to enjoy while I ramble about my film. Let's get started. So I was actually torn with if I wanted to make this film a thing at first. My first thought was that it was to make it my senior capstone film, but I had another idea at playing in the background that I also wanted to do, which was Buttercup, a film I made in late 2023 about a little girl who summons an eldritch horror to be her pet dog. I thought of the pros and cons for both. I love the idea of both Buttercup and for We Ignored the Signs, but I didn't know which one would make a better capstone film, and if I would ever have the chance to make the other one if I went with one. Basically, I didn't want to throw one idea out because I wouldn't be entertained with it enough to finish the actual thing, and I wanted to make both films. Decision anxiety. My problems were solved in my fall semester of that year. My intro to animation class wanted us to do a full 15-second film for our final project, following the full animation pipeline. Me, with two whole film ideas in my head, picked one of them and decided that the film would fit as my capstone film. The one that would be the eventual film itself, We Ignored the Signs. And the one for the intro class would be Buttercup. I ended up going with this because I wasn't sure Buttercup was challenging enough to show as a capstone film. Don't get me wrong, I love the idea, and the reception to the final, what ended up being an over 3-minute long film compared to the 15-second requirement, was great, but in my head I wanted my capstone film to cover a wide range of skills. Buttercup mostly took place in one room, but technically wasn't the most complicated piece of animation I have ever done, and although I did love making it, working on the film only solidified that yes, We Ignore the Signs is a better concept for a capstone film. I think you can make an interesting film that's set in one room. I just felt like I wanted to do something a bit more than what my concept for Buttercup offered for my senior capstone is all. I know a lot of people really like Buttercup, so I don't want to make it seem like I didn't like how Buttercup came out. So now I actually had to start on the pre-production for the thing. Pre-production for the next year was mostly brainstorming with the occasional concept art, and because I had started a new sketchbook around that time, I had gotten the idea for the film. I have all the little sketched ideas in one place, just all in one sketchbook. The first thing I needed to do was actually come up with a story for this, because fun fact, my original idea for We Ignore the Signs was not specific at all. The original idea was horror story where we are fleas, and I ran with that. So I had to think of what could be a good metaphor for it, and I quickly landed on the planet is a living thing and people are fleas. I didn't want to lean into the whole Mother Earth that hates people because we pollute the planet angle, since fleas currently are not accelerating climate change as far as I'm aware, and I didn't want to go with humans are a virus that needs to be eradicated, which is such a boring premise to me. Instead, I thought of a more creative way that fits the theme. Well, fleas live on living things because they use blood for their eggs and to eat, and we live on the planets. Fleas and humans are animals, but we don't like fleas living on us because of the biting and such, so a planet that's a living thing wouldn't like that either. So what if there was a group of people who found the planet and wanted to start a colony on it, but the planet did not want people to be living on it because they're just a nuisance? That sounds good. It doesn't do the whole humans are a virus cliche that I don't like in some sci-fi stories, and instead just goes, sometimes nature is just annoying, even if we don't see the consequences of trying to relieve ourselves of its presence. I go back to that idea later because at this point now, I had to think about the characters, and as I did that, I had to think about the style of the film. I wanted to try animating in a slightly different style for my own, one that wouldn't take too long to master, but one that was simple enough that I could cut some parts out of my usual animation process. What I ended up going with was round and softly squared shapes for characters, simplifying the eyes down to some basic shapes, and came up with this design. After some practice, it was easy to draw it and saved me some time in drawing the process, compared to if I had decided to draw all the characters with how I normally draw people. The eyes being simplified definitely was a big thing because I would have taken a long time animating those eyes if I did it how I usually do it. But what about the people? We still need to get to who the characters are, why they are on the planet in the first place. I could make them a wandering group that stumbled across the planet a la Alien, or maybe they always lived there. But that didn't really feel right. I ended up deciding on a research team, one that discovered the planet and wanted to do some research on it. And I got to this conclusion for this part of the story when I was listening to, of all things surprisingly, Harlan Guthrie's podcast, Deviser. Deviser is nothing like We Ignore the Signs. It's a short 7-episode podcast about a man named Sun taking humanity home to a destroyed Earth and finding a dark secret within the ship's walls. It's sci-fi horror, but what does it have to do with We Ignore the Signs? Well, it's specifically in the audio design. The first half of episode 6 of Deviser is narrated by Dad, an AI on the ship that helps Sun. Dad is a character with secrets, and it's very obvious early on that he's hiding something from Sun. But Sun doesn't actually know what the secret is, even if he recognizes that Dad is hiding something from him. Episode 6 is when Dad reveals the truth about the ship, that humanity has never actually left Earth as far as Dad knows, and he has ever actually met a real human before he was activated. And after a solar flare destroyed most of the information he had about humanity that the humans had stored in him, he took what was left from the actual flare itself that wasn't destroyed and decided to recreate humanity on his own, failing multiple times before we get to the point of the story the Deviser is set in. And I love how this section of the story is told through narration by Dad, intermingling the scenes that have happened in the past. I'll play a little clip right now so you kind of understand what I mean, but I definitely recommend going and listening to the full podcast yourself if you don't mind horror.
I was motivated to change. Scouring the earth for an underground facility of decent construction, I began the long and arduous process of moving what remaining data stores there were. This required something I had not considered before: the ability to create. I created for the first time in my existence rudimentary electronic lifts, things that could carry and move the data stores. I believe my creators never intended me to relocate, but built me with enough forethought that I could make repairs on myself. It took 200 years to perfect these small rudimentary lifts, but what I was left with was a great sense of purpose.
Of all the stuff in that podcast, that is what stuck with me. Harlan is amazing with sound design, but something about that half of the episode scratched an itch like no other, and it being such a good piece of audio work made the final idea for what's hit like a truck. The characters in We Ignore the Signs are a research team who have discovered this planet. They get to this planet, and it turns and starts to kill them off one by one, and all this information is narrated to us by our main character right after all of this had happened. Which leads us to our next thing. Who is this mysterious narrator? Making it the head researcher was an easy enough decision, but who do I want this character to be? I wanted them to be older, which means I feasibly cannot voice this character. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I have a very young voice, which means I kinda have to look for a voice actor, because unfortunately I sound like a pubescent child. But we'll get to the voice acting part later. I started sketching a guy, and after a bit ended up with this person. He's very square and soft and shaped, and I like his vibe. Now to give him a name. This is where the research part of the film came in. There was very basic knowledge about fleas that everyone knows about. They bite, and their bites are itchy, and dogs are prone to getting them. But what else? How, on the nose could we make this film about fleas? So I went and I looked up other words for fleas, but didn't really find anything that was scientific enough. But every species of animal has a Latin name, and a subspecies, and a species names, and all that other biology mumbo-jumbo I'm too much of an art major to know the specifics about. So I found one name of the subclasses that fleas belong in, Aphanoptera. I shortened it down to just the name Aphon, and Dr. Aphon was born. I ended up doing this with every character on this team. Each one is named after different parasites, including ticks, lice, bedbugs, and more. I designed every character, even if all of them don't actually appear in the film. It just means I have characters to pick and choose from if I needed a character to be in the spot. The only exceptions were Dr. Izo and Dr. Thera, who I had named in the script, and therefore they absolutely did show up in the film at multiple times. Hell, Dr. Izo never actually appeared outside of his suit, and look, here he is, pre-squished! Also, I simplified the suit designs down a lot, and then my classmates were making fun of me because they looked like Among Us, and I just went with it. I don't care that they look like Among Us. I like the suit designs. I was going for something simple, something cute, something that they could wear on the planet, but maybe not actually in, the vacuum of space itself, and I like it. It was easy. It worked out for me. Shh. Now, I said I wasn't a biology art major, but you know what other subject I do love? History. I love history, and because I was an art and film student, I had to take history classes for those. And this bad boy right here is the Rosetta Stone. It was a contract piece that was found by one of Napoleon's officers before being taken by the British after they defeated France in war. It also was the key to translating hieroglyphics, and I love this stupid rock. I think the history for it is so cool, and I love that this thing was a treaty from thousands of years ago, even before the stone was found by the French, because it is such an important piece of history. It's so cool. It's a cool rock. Look at this rock, guys. But I had hit a rock with my film. Bad stuff is happening, but what happens at the end? Do they all die gruesome deaths? Do they, get crushed one by one by a massive object of incredible size? Like a rock? Kidding. Does their water supply get poisoned by a mysterious poison that they don't know where it's coming from? Does Dawn dish soap rain from the sky? Well, I was thinking about my favorite rock, the Rosetta Stone, and it had me thinking about another really cool thing. Long-term nuclear waste warning messages. Messages that are not too descriptive enough, but vague enough to tell anyone at any time period, so as long as they could translate the warning, that something where they're trying to go will kill them, that they can't fight it, and they won't be able to see it, and that they shouldn't enter as if, nothing is there for them. And I think that's so cool. And so that's what I was started thinking about the Rosetta Stone, and also thinking about long-term nuclear waste warning messages. And I was like, what if another alien race came to this planet before and left a warning, but because the scientists couldn't read the language, they had to send it off to get translated, and only learned what the message was after a bunch of people died, and then finally decided to leave despite the fact that people were dying because they found out the place was not a planet of honor. And there became my answer, a reason to leave the planet and a way to end the story. The translations came back and the message was clear: leave. I wanted there to be these immense monuments on the planet, and so the obsidian and jade obelisks stood out. Tall alien structures that look out of place in the otherwise skin-toned environment with just short leafy vegetation. I also made my own font just for this film, and I know it's not impressive. I just took the alphabet and numbers 1 through 26 and stacked them on top of each other. It's very obvious if you look at it long enough. I was on a deadline, and that's how creative I was going to be. And for people working on your own projects, sometimes good enough is better than not getting it done at all because it isn't perfect. If I didn't have a deadline, I probably could have made something a bit more sophisticated, but I needed to cut my losses on some stuff, and this was the big one. Now to name the planet, and the answer was very easy. X422 Sapien. 422 for April 22nd, which is Earth Day, and Sapien for after Homo sapien, the name for humans. And then I threw an X in there because a lot of exoplanets seem to have X in their name. The original concept had water on the surface of the planet, but I changed it to have water be under the surface. I had this scene play out. Was it not obvious that they were literally extracting blood to drink? Listen, I was very on the nose with the flea theming here. It's my flea film for a reason. There was some other design stuff I did with how I wanted it to look. I leaned towards a futuristic style for the space tech, but took some inspiration from concept futurism. Think of the technology in the Alien franchise, with how it looks futuristic and yet retro. I love that style. I also wanted to lean into the flea's theme a bit more and made the pods the scientists both live and work in look vaguely flea-shaped. Here's the original concept for it. As you can see, I simplified it a lot when making the final design in the film, but I had a short deadline for this project and I was determined to do everything I had planned for it. I was also taking 4 classes on top of this. Keep in mind, I was both working on this animation, a bunch of animations for another class, which was my motion design and composition class. I was also making a video game, I was also taking a history class, and I was also taking a photography class. I was taking so many studio-based classes this semester. I had a deadline and I did not have a lot of time to work on this. But yeah, I wanted to do everything I had planned for it, even if my deadline was very short, and I wanted it to be a unique portfolio piece that I could use and for it to be fully finished. My university offered a pre-production course for senior projects as well, which basically you could take it to get all the prep work done for your senior project through the course of a semester instead of trying to find time to do that on your own or in between classes, or as you're doing your senior project, like some other people had to do. I really wanted to take this class, and I felt like I was prepared to not only breeze through the assignments, but I welcomed the time I would get to just work on the project, all while getting the credits for it. And unfortunately, life had other plans. I transferred to my school, which on the bright side meant I only really needed classes that related to my major. On the downside, it also apparently meant that I missed my requirements for the pre-production class for the fall semester before I graduated. The class required you to have taken 2 of the 4 required animation courses it had as a list of prereqs before you could be considered for the class, and the spring before that semester, I was in the middle of taking my second one. I ended up taking the other 2 next semester. The professor for the class was my professor for a different class, so I was recommended to sign up for a 5th class that would cover my last requirement for my major, get in contact with my professor to ask if he would let me take the class, and then drop it if he says yes. And considering one of my other professors, the one who I made the film Buttercup for her class, was willing to vouch for me to be able to take the class, I could, take it if he lets me. And I would have the requirements by the end of the semester I was applying for this class at. And then this professor never got back to me. So a week later, the class was full and I couldn't take it, and I was so upset, and I'm still salty about it, but it's fine because I have the film done now and I guess it works out. I guess. So I guess I spent both that fall semester and their winter break putting together thumbnails, color keys, reference sheets, 3D models, a whole animatic in between class and work. This guy! Now, I did have one issue with my animation I needed to solve before the actual production could begin: finding a voice actor to voice Dr. Afon. I looked at my options to see what I could get done. I could ask a classmate, but I didn't know which of them would have been comfortable with doing voice acting, and there were only a few I felt would be okay with it, but their voices didn't really fit him. A lot of my female classmates do voice acting for some of my other animation classmates' projects, but I didn't know a lot of male voice actors who like doing voice acting, and a lot of the ones who had voices who fit were not animation majors, and I felt would have been really weird to ask him to voice act for, so I just didn't. So my classmates for him were probably had the direction to go. But I was also very particular with the fact that I wanted to be someone who I've heard do voice acting before, which I think added on to that. I could have easily picked Red, my friend who played Buttercup, but in a previous conversation about voice acting, he said he was interested in doing smaller background roles, so I didn't want to ask him to be the main narrator again. But he did end up playing another one of the scientists in We Ignore the Signs, along with another classmate of mine who also is a very good animator. I love her stuff. She was also one of the people who worked on Found You, which was the stop-motion film. She designed the little witch character. Her art is very cute. Now, it's no secret that I'm into podcasts, and there was one person who ended up coming to mind when I was thinking of getting into contact with a voice actor for a podcast voice actor for this role. You all know him and love him. I'm talking about J.J. Korn, the creator and dungeon master of What's Left of Us. I love his narration in What's Left of Us, and he was someone I was familiar enough with that I felt like I could talk to without my overly anxious ass being too nervous to have a conversation. Yeah, that's a problem of mine. But he was really nice, and he agreed to voice act for my film, and I still was really new to voice direction. But he was also really nice about that, and really patient, and I also do want to point this out because I feel so sad and embarrassed about this fact, but he, one of the things that Jay did, and he was really super nice, and I didn't ask him to do this, and he just did it on his own, and I love him for it, but he read through and he helped me with editing my script to make the dialogue stronger, and it came out so good, and I did not realize until a month afterwards that I had forgot to put editor credits for him in the film. And by the time I did, I had deleted my Adobe subscription because fuck Adobe, and I deleted the file that I had edited We Ignored the Signs on. And I feel so bad about that. But anyway, you guys should go listen to What's Left of Us and tell Jay how awesome he is, because he was the real MVP in the production of this film. He was also one of the few people I consistently sent work in progresses of We Ignored the Signs to, so he got to see it before a majority of people got to see it, even people at my school. Yeah. But now that I had my voice lines and pre-production done, by the first day of my senior project class, I was all ready to go. And there wasn't too much to talk about with the production after that. I tried a lot of new things with this film, mainly in the compositing parts of it, since I was taking a compositing and motion design course while working on the film, and thus was doing some new techniques as I worked on it. But I also did rotoscoping with 3D models for this. I only used them for a couple of scenes, mainly anything that involved the drones, the pods, and this one complicated shot I did with the spaceship. This technique was really fun, and it seemed like a lot more complicated shots that would have been a pain to do by hand. All the characters, of course, were not rotoscoped, but everything came together really great. I used puppet tools for some of the smaller movements I didn't hand animate, and I used After Effects to add some shadows and highlights that would have been harder to animate by hand. I met my deadline early enough to polish the audio more, since I was editing the sound effects as I was working on it, and they were fine. They weren't the greatest, but since I finished the animation so early, I went back and I just kept editing the sound effects until I was very happy with how they came out. And yeah, it came out great, and I very much enjoyed that, which was great considering like one of the inspirations for this story was specifically the audio design of a podcast. And this film has become something very special to me. I spent almost my whole time at UMBC brainstorming and working on it, and to take everything I learned to try and make a polished short story was so much fun. I learned a lot from this, and I want to make more animations in the futures. I have ideas, mainly involving a Shindo, my sandbox universe I've been playing with, that I can't wait to make a whole video about because I do have that planned in the future, but we'll have to see what the future holds. And I hope you guys enjoyed seeing my thought and design process for We Ignored the Signs. I'm happy I have something like YouTube where I could just yap about my projects, and something like school where I tried making something different from what I usually create. I want to make more videos like this where I dip into the process of me trying new things. I actually am spending Art Fight practicing drawing chibis since I feel like I haven't quite nailed that yet. I plan on making a video about that next month, so stick around to see when it's done. This should be coming out near the end of July, so there might not be enough time to do much revenging on my end, but if you did want to attack me or bookmark any refs for next year, then go ahead. I'll link my Art Fight down below, and if you haven't watched We Ignore the Signs yet, then that too will be linked in the description of this video. Let me know what you think about my Flea film. Talk to you later. Bye!